All right, I have 10:30, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this morning's Beef Brunch Educational Series webinar. My name is Ashley Edwards. I'm an assistant extension agent, and coordinator for animal science programs with the LSU Ag Center. So I'm going to be hosting today with the help of Jason Holmes and Vince Desatel. Our speaker today is Dr. Ron Strahan. Dr. Strahan is an associate professor in the LSU School of Plant, Environmental, and Soil Sciences. He serves as our weed specialist throughout the state. So today he's going to be talking about managing common pasture weeds, as well as in your hay meadows too. So just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Your microphones are going to be muted. We ask that you keep them muted throughout the webinar. So if you are joining us online through the Teams app or link, you should see access to a Q&A box, and you can direct your questions to the Q&A box at any time during the presentation. If you're calling in or if you have problems with the Q&A box, you can text your questions to me. My number is 512-818-5476. Again, if you're calling in or if you don't see the Q&A box online, you can text your questions to me throughout the webinar. That number is 512-818-5476. In the interest of time, we are going to wait and answer those questions at the end of the presentation. So with that, Dr. Strahan, thank you for joining us today and taking time out of your schedule this morning. You can go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Ash. It's a pleasure to be here. Go ahead and start this. I hope everyone can see this.
Yes, sir, you're good to go.
Okay, very good. We're going to talk to you today about managing weeds in our pastures and our hay meadows. And first of all, just a little bit of background. We do have annual and perennial weeds in our hay meadows. For instance, we're seeing a lot of crabgrass. When we have a lot of rainfall, we see a lot of crabgrass in our hay meadows. And if you're in a hay meadow, you want to try to control it. If it's in your pasture, of course, you're going to try to graze that. We're seeing a lot of pigweed. Pigweed's a big seed producer, so lots of pigweed in barnyard areas, and cattle will sometimes graze on that to a certain extent. And I've rarely seen a pasture or a hay meadow that didn't have a lot of horse nettle, which is a perennial weed, a perennial broadleaf weed, considered to be a toxic plant. And then barnyard grass is another one that we're seeing a lot of this year, especially in South Louisiana where we had a lot of rainfall. This is more of a rice weed, but we're seeing this one in hay meadows this year. And of course, if it's in your pasture, your cattle would just graze it out. And Buttercup's a cool season annual broadleaf, and that's the one we have. It starts germinating in October and November, and that's a sea of yellow flowers in our pastures all through the springtime. And that one's very easily controlled with 2,4-D. There's also some biennial plants like a lot of those big thistles that you see out there in your pastures and in your hay meadows. Those are biennial often. There's yellow thistle, there's bull thistle, pretty common in Louisiana, and they're biennial. In other words, it takes 2 years to complete their life cycle. If you're seeing a flower, that means it's on its second year, and it produces a puff ball of seeds, and those seeds are spread by the air and by the wind. So lots of thistles in pastures can be difficult to control, especially if you're trying to save your clover. So, and everybody knows this, but just a quick reminder, the types of weeds you're going to see out in a pasture. We're going to have broadleaves, we're going to have grasses, and we're going to have sedges. A good example of a broadleaf is horse nettle. It's got showy flowers and it's trying to attract insects for pollination. Selecting a broadleaf out of our pastures, not very difficult in most cases. We can find something that works. In LSU, we've done a lot of work through the years trying to figure out which herbicides are best to control broadleaves, certain broadleaves in a pasture. So we have a pretty good idea what works pretty well on things like horse nettle, like Grazon P plus D, for instance. So we can control most broadleaves in a pasture setting because you're growing a grass. There's enough differences between grasses and broadleaves where we can control most broadleaves. Grasses are the problem. Something like a Johnson grass can be an issue, although there is a herbicide now that works pretty well on it called Outrider. Controlling a grass, you're growing grass, you're growing Bermuda grass, or you're growing Bahia grass. Trying to take crabgrass out of Bermuda grass or Bahia grass, once it's emerged and growing, that's a lot more difficult than trying to take a broadleaf out, because that crabgrass or that barnyard grass is a lot like the grass that you're growing for hay. So that makes it difficult, taking a grass out of a grass. And then we have sedges. Sedges look like grasses. We have purple nutsedge that you see there at the bottom. And sedges have triangular stems. We have herbicides that will select sedges out of a pasture. In most cases, there are some sedges that are very hard to control. That just happens to be purple nutsedge that the pointer's on right there. And that's the #1 ranked weed problem in the world, purple nutsedge. So it can be difficult in certain crops, but in pastures and hay meadows, we can control most sedges. There are some sedges that are very difficult to control. And we're seeing a lot more sedges with the amount of rainfall that we've had this year. And rushes would be another category that I'll mention here in a little bit. But one of the reasons we have so many weeds, I always like to use the pigweed example. Pigweed produces up to 1 million seeds per plant, and the seeds can live for 30 to 50 years in the soil. So if you ever let pigweed go to seed, that's one seed that germinated, produced a plant, and 1 million came from that one plant. So that's when we have so many seeds produced, when we have so many weeds. You know, with crabgrass, it produces 10,000 to 15,000 seeds per plant. It can live for 10 plus years in the soil. Barnyard grass produces 1 million seeds per plant and can live, several years in the soil. So we have a lot of seed production occurring. And so why do we have so many weeds in our pastures other than the fact that there's a tremendous seed production? Many times we let the fertility slip in our pastures and our hay meadows. And when Bermuda grass loves fertilizer, and when you let the fertility slip, you'll see that weeds will get a competitive advantage. If you allow weeds to compete for very long, they'll start shading out your pasture. Bermuda grass, very shade intolerant, and it'll start declining. Really, the one true way to kill Bermuda grass is to shade it out. You can spray all kind of herbicides on it that will kind of ding it up and make it look terrible, but Bermuda grass usually comes back. Shading it will eventually kill it. And so that's what weeds will be doing, is they'll take nutrients away from it, but they also will shade things like Bermuda grass and Bahia grass, and that's very detrimental to your stand of Bermuda grass. Hang on just a second. So overgrazing is also an issue too. Sometimes we just overgraze our pastures, and you'll end up giving a competitive advantage to weeds. The weeds will be left there, and we'll overstock, and sometimes in that case, soil compaction becomes a problem. Things like smut grass becomes a real issue when we are overgrazing and stock too many animals. Soil compaction, there's certain weeds that love soil compaction. Goosegrass, for instance, in a hay meadow, smut grass, vasi grass, Dallas grass, they all like soil compaction, and if we overstock our animals, we'll get a lot more compaction. The competitive advantage will go to those weeds. So some weeds are also toxic. We don't always think about it, but there's a weed that we see a lot of, especially in South Louisiana. It looks a lot like buttercup, and that's butterweed. It grows in wet areas, poorly drained areas, and that can cause liver cirrhosis, and symptoms are delayed for a little while. We see a lot of pigweed also. We'll see a lot of pigweed, and it's really not the actual pea part of sickle pod that's a problem. Sickle pod can be toxic. It's more so the leaves that are toxic on sickle pod. So another one that we see that can be toxic is buttercup, which is a sea of yellow flowers in our pastures. But I tell you, the one that's really hard to deal with is Perilla Mint. Also lantana, I see that one in Vermilion Parish sometimes as an issue. You may have that in your flower bed, but that's a highly toxic plant. But that Perilla Mint is one that actually kills cattle every year. Every year in the state, and every state pretty much in the South, you'll see cattle killed by Perilla Mint, and it's toxic to the lungs, and in the hay it can still be toxic. So we don't always think about something like this, but I know those pictures right there, you may not be able to tell it very well what it is, but you Google those pictures or Google Perilla Mint, and you'll see that's a very toxic plant. You can kill it with 2,4-D, but it's something you want to kill out of your pastures, because we get cows, livestock killed every year from Perilla Mint. So that will be one to consider. You may not think about this, but Johnson grass can also be a toxic plant when it gets under stress, and you would never allow horses to graze Johnson grass. But Johnson grass is also a very good forage, but when it gets under stress, it can have some toxicity, and it's prussic acid, and but in the hay, it's not always present. So this would be one to think about when you get into stress, and you would never allow horses to graze it. Outrider herbicide, which actually kills sedges, is extremely good at killing Johnson grass in a hay meadow. Now you would likely just graze it out in good grazing conditions. Over time, cattle, livestock would graze it out, but in a hay meadow, it can be an issue. And an outrider herbicide will select it out of your hay meadow, out of Bermuda grass or Bahia grass, and it's probably the best herbicide I've ever seen on Johnson grass, and it's very easy on the Bermuda grass or the Bahia grass. So we do have some new herbicides. Duracore is one we've been evaluating for a while, and we're still actually evaluating it, and that one contains aminopyrrolid and fluoroperoxyfen. It's not a restricted use herbicide, so you don't have to have an applicator card for it. We really like the 16-ounce rate, not that low-end rate. I've looked at it a little bit on marsh elder, a little bit on horse nettle, got a little bit of dog fennel activity. It is a clover killer because it does contain aminopyrrolid. Now, this is one we're still evaluating right now. It's been out for a year or so. We're still evaluating it. And there is also Resilon, and we've really thoroughly evaluated this herbicide, I believe. I've been looking at it for probably 4 or 5 years now. It's a very good pre-emergence herbicide. You would use it for your hay meadows. It's extremely good pre-emergence on crabgrass, goosegrass. It's also extremely good on volunteer ryegrass. You would apply it in late summer, maybe early fall for volunteer ryegrass, and it really cleans house. You see here on the left, where I sprayed in early fall, versus where we didn't spray the untreated area, and that's a good strong ryegrass stand. That's at the Iberia Research Station, and Resilon just extremely good on volunteer ryegrass in your hay meadows. Now, Resilon may not be a good fit for you if you also want to include ryegrass in your hay meadows and cut it for hay. So, but Resilon, very good pre-emergence on crabgrass, very good pre-emergence on goosegrass, and also is extremely good on volunteer ryegrass. For crabgrass and goosegrass, you'd make an application in late January, early February of 3 ounces per acre in your hay meadow, and then you would follow that up after the first cutting with another 3 ounces. It has been very good in our trials over the last few years, and it's been out almost a year now. So when it comes to managing weeds and forages, we want to prevent the weeds that are growing on our fence rows, prevent any seed production, so try to keep your fence rows as clean as possible within reason. And also try to maintain your pastures. Don't overgraze them. Don't keep your fertility up in your hay meadows. You'll see a shift in to more of a weed population if you let your fertility get low. Remember, you're taking a lot of your fertility out of the field, a lot of your fertilizer out of the field whenever you harvest your hay. So make sure you replace those nutrients so you can keep your Bermuda grass especially competitive. Bush hogging is also really good. You know, there's certain weeds that won't grow in your yard that you'll see in a pasture. And if you can kind of keep some of them clipped back, you'll open that canopy up and you will see that you have less pressure where you can bush hog periodically too. And herbicides too. Herbicides are key, and I want you to be able to spray with confidence. Most of these herbicides that you're spraying are not going to have much of any kind of grazing restriction. They're safe products. You're not going to kill your cows, and you're not going to kill your pasture either. I get that a lot. Oh, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to kill my pasture. Well, there's certain things you would watch, like metsulfuron, for instance, Cimarron, chaparral, anything that contains metsulfuron, you wouldn't put that over the top of Bahia grass. And then if you're trying to maintain your clover, you got to watch herbicides that contain the active ingredient aminopyrrolid. That would be like Grazon next. Metsulfuron is also pretty tough on clover. Piccolo Ram is a long-term clover killer. So the thing is, when you have clover out there, it becomes a delicate situation to try to control weeds. And there's hopefully going to be some help in the future with a herbicide coming out pretty soon that possibly can help us out a little bit on that one. But another thing too is I want you to be calibrated. It's not hard to calibrate. I have a calibration handout that I can send to you, and it's just not hard to calibrate. I want you to be accurate with your applications. It'll save money in the long run, and you'll find that you have a better kill on the weeds that you're going after. So just some current recommendations for some of the troublesome weeds. These are the weeds I get the most calls on, and one of them is broomsedge. And broomsedge is a grassy weed. It's not really a sedge, it's a grassy weed that you see kind of in poor areas, low fertility areas. Although it pretty much grows anywhere it wants to, you'll see it usually in areas where the soils are kind of poor, where the fertility is poor. Sometimes you'll associate it with lower pH soils. The thing is, through the years, we've done a number of studies on broomsedge, and you can't select it out of a pasture. You know, there's not a herbicide that you can go out there and spray that will kill broomsedge and not cause damage to your Bermuda grass or your Bahia grass. So you're not going to be able to spray it out more than likely without causing a lot of injury. It is sensitive to glyphosate, but it's sensitive to rates that would still be pretty detrimental to Bermuda grass or Bahia grass. So it's important to have a good sod base, a good Bahia or Bermuda grass stand, a good thick stand. That broomsedge doesn't like competition, and it doesn't like to be clipped either. So if you can keep it clipped, and we've looked at this, so a 3-year study, keeping it clipped does seem to lower the population. Those big, robust plants don't like to be clipped. It has to use up carbohydrates every time it's clipped. So, you know, that's one thing too, kind of keeping that canopy open, don't allow seed production. The thing is, though, to remember, we can't selectively spray it out. I've looked at all kinds of herbicides on it. I looked at Pastora, which is a herbicide that has some pretty good grass activity, but it completely releases broomsedge. Plateau completely releases broomsedge. So it's not something for now that we're going to be able to select out of our pastures with a herbicide that's not going to injure our Bermuda grass or Bahia. So are weed wipers possible? I wanted to do that study last year, but COVID got us, and but hopefully we can do something with that this year, wiping broomsedge with a weed wiper and glyphosate while it's still green in the late summer. So broomsedge can be really tough, but right now I'd say keep it clipped, keep your fertility levels up. Some areas may have to be completely renovated, but for the most part, fertility and keeping that pasture clipped and hay meadows clipped as best you can. So what about smut grass? Smut grass is one that's native to Asia, found throughout the southeast. I'd say south of Alexandria, this is the #1 weed problem, and it is becoming a huge problem in North Louisiana as well. It's a big seed producer. It loves compacted soils, So if you overgraze, you know, stock too many animals, get really heavy clay, get that soil compacted, the competitive advantage goes to the smut grass. It does have that smut fungus that hits those seeds, which we believe does cause some of those seeds not to be viable. But still, there's thousands of seeds produced by this plant, and it can take over a pasture or a hay meadow in a short amount of time. We rely on Velpar as a selective herbicide, and I've seen it completely fail. It's almost always associated with rainfall. The thing about Velpar, it's not a perfect herbicide. It's a tree killing herbicide. It has no grazing restriction now. It can be expensive. You know, you're going to spend north of $40 per acre. But rainfall is the key. It's completely root uptake. I've had failures when we didn't get any rain. You put it out, didn't get any rain for a month or so, and complete failure. And that's a lot of money per acre to have a failure. So we almost say spray it in the rain if you can. Completely root uptake, not absorbed by the leaves, completely taken up by the roots. So this is one. Just be careful when you apply it. Make sure it's you don't put it around trees, and make sure that you're getting some rainfall pretty soon after you apply it. What about Basal grass? This was another one from South America. Very invasive. It's a clumping type grass. We see this one a lot in hay meadows. You can pretty much graze it out over time. And we like a weed wiper on this one with glyphosate, a good percentage, like anywhere from a 10 to a 50% solution. With a weed wiper, we've had success. Pastora is a selective herbicide that has activity on Basal grass. I've had it look good. I've had it look terrible. Last year it looked good. I have a test out right now. It doesn't look so good. So it can be erratic. You want to make sure the Basal grass is not so big when you apply it. You want it to be about 10 inches or so or less. Often you need a follow-up application in about eight weeks or so when you make this herbicide application with the Pastora. The weed wiper is probably, with glyphosate, it's probably been our most effective treatment. And so we are seeing a lot more plants that like wet conditions over the last few years. And you know, there's another category, and it's called rushes. And these plants like wet areas, and I'm seeing a lot of this one right here. This is Poverty Rush. And Poverty Rush is one we've had a replicated trial on in St. Tammany Parish in a polo field of all places. And we've had a number of strip trials done on this one, demo type trials done on Poverty Rush. We had one this year in Lafayette Parish with Stan Dutill. And this is a rush. It's a cool season rush. Juncus is the genus, and it's a cool season rush. So it really likes to grow from about October to about June. And once it produces that seed head, that flower, it's not easily controlled. We've had luck with permit or outrider on, especially permit, and with that February timing. Unfortunately, it grows where the area is wet, you know, and so you may not be able to get in that pasture or that hay meadow because it's so wet. But if you could time it, January, February is one of our better times to try to kill it with permit or outrider. We've also, in a turf trial last year, October, November applications seem to have some activity on as well with permit or outrider. So we know going early is the best thing to do. The best timing is to go early before it produces that seed head. It's still out right now, and that seed head is out, but it's kind of in its dormant season. It doesn't like hot Africa-like temperatures like we're starting to get now, and it goes dormant during that period. But it's going to come right back out as we start to cool down in the fall, and that may be the best timing, or try to get it in January, February if you can get into your hay meadows or your pastures. Becoming more and more of a problem though with all the rainfall that we're having. So what about some broadleaf weeds now? We would normally consider broadleaf weeds to be the easier to control because they're different enough from our grasses that we're growing out there, our hay meadow grasses or our forage grasses, that we can select most of these broadleaves out, like horse nettle, for instance. I rarely see a pasture that doesn't have a little horse nettle in it. And this is in the Solanaceae family. It's in the same family that you have tomatoes and peppers, and all parts of the plant are actually considered toxic, especially the fruit that it makes. And it does make a lot of fruit. I don't think I have one here, but we can control it. It may take you more than one application per growing season, but we can control it. I really like Grazon P plus D on it. I like Grazon Next on it. Surmount is very good in 2,4-D restricted areas. We've had great luck in replicated trials with Cimarron Max, and Cimarron Max is just simply metsulfuron and Weedmaster or Brash tank mixed together. We've had a lot of studies over the years on horse nettle. We feel like we know pretty much what works on it. We've had better luck with applications in May and June than we have delaying the applications to August. And you wouldn't want to let it persist out there in your pastures or hay meadows anyway through the month of through all those growing season, because it's taking nutrients away. And it's a wide leaf plant that will do a lot of shading of your Bermuda or your Bahia grass. So we know we can control horse nettle. It just might take you a couple of applications per growing season, and maybe take you a couple of years to really get that population under control. You can see that lower right hand picture there was an area that we conducted a test in Lafayette Parish a few years ago. So that one right there can really become a huge problem in a hay meadow or a pasture if it's allowed to persist. It's a perennial, and it's also a big seed producer. Well, what about briars? We have blackberry, and we have a lot of dewberry briars, and dewberry wants to grow flat, wants to take territory. A blackberry wants to grow more upright, wants to be more like a shrub. Cattle won't graze it, goats will graze them. It's mat forming, of course. It does shade out our forage grasses, and often it takes multiple applications to give good control of briars. Another thing too, if you see that hair all over the stem, that's a dewberry. The blackberry doesn't have all that red hair on the stem. So the upper picture there, that picture there, let's see if I can, oops, that upper hand picture there is actually a dewberry. So what's good on briars? I like Remedy a lot. The active ingredient metsulfuron, which is in MSM turf, and Patriot, that's also very good on blackberry and dewberries. Cimarron Max, which is metsulfuron plus Weedmaster. Crossbow, which is triclopyr and 2,4-D, that's very good. Grazon Next is pretty good. Chaparral is excellent on briars. Grazon P plus D 2,4-D are really not that effective when applied alone. If we put Grazon P plus D out, we have a few briars, we might spike that application with a pint of remedy just to improve the activity on the briars. The thing about it is briars also it takes territory and shades out your grasses. It might take you a couple of years to really get rid of a serious briar problem, but you can get rid of it over time. What about dog fennel? This is a summer perennial, finely dissected leaves, also produces a lot of seeds, and the seeds are blown with the wind. Your perfect pristine pasture or hay meadow may not have a single dog fennel, but your neighbor may just be covered in them. Or your fence row may have plenty of them on there, and eventually they're going to make their way into your pasture or hay meadow. So the thing is, you got to stay on top of them. Big seed producer also. Deep root system can be harder to control the deeper we go into the growing season. I like Grazon P plus D on this one also. I like Cimarron Max on it also, which again is metsulfuron and Weedmaster. Surmount has been very effective up in 2,4-D restricted areas. Weedmaster 2,4-D when it's about 4 to 6 inches tall in the very early season. I always say there's about a 10-minute window to get Weedmaster out on dog fennel for it to be effective. But we've had some luck early in the growing season with Weedmaster and 2,4-D when the dog fennel is very small, 4 to 6 inches tall. Very narrow window to get that application out. What about thistles? As I told you earlier, most of these thistles that you see, including the ones in those pictures there, are biennial. It takes 2 years for their life cycle to be completed. The plant on the upper left-hand side there is probably a first season, very mature plant. Plant right beside it there on the right side is more than likely a 2-year-old plant flowering, producing seeds. And you can see in that lower left-hand picture there, tremendous seed producer, little parachutes in those seeds everywhere. And it is a huge problem in the early season of growing season of our pastures and hay meadows. The thing is, we know herbicides that work really well on it. Grazon Next, P plus D, Chaparral, high rates of 2,4-D are very good on thistles. The problem is that we're really tough on the clovers. I mean, very tough on the clover when it comes to Grazon Next, P plus D especially. Very tough on the clovers. And we've had a lot of luck spot treating and using a dye, spot treating with either glyphosate or 2,4-D. 2.5 ounces per gallon. That's about a 2% solution. Spot treating, I know it's labor intensive, but when you are trying to protect your clover, this has been a pretty good treatment for us, spot treating. In replicated trials, we've had 100% control with either glyphosate or 2,4-D. The good thing about 2,4-D, using it in spot treatments is you don't have a lot of collateral damage on your pasture if your pasture is waking up, in the early growing season. So we can control thistles, and we're going to look at some more herbicides in the future to see if we can save our clover in this situation. But that's the problem, is we can blow the thistles away with many herbicides. It's just we also blow our clover away. What about the Chinese tallow tree? I know no one has any problems with Chinese tallow tree, so I'll just skip that one. Well, probably shouldn't skip it because the tallow tree is extremely common throughout the state. It's another one that's a big seed producer, makes about 100,000 seeds per plant. It's an ornamental too. It's brought in kind of as an ornamental, beautiful fall colors, and you used to be able to order it as a popcorn tree from catalogs. And you can see that lower right-hand picture there. It does make some pretty fall colors, and if you ever planted one for fall colors in a few years, well, you would have beautiful fall colors, and your neighbors would all have beautiful fall colors too, because birds spread those seeds everywhere. And they're extremely viable. The seeds are extremely viable, and so everybody will have beautiful fall colors. And it is the #1 weed problem in wetland areas, the Chinese tallow tree. If you look as you drive across and you see forested areas, you'll see a lot of tallow trees infesting those areas. So what works on it? Anything with the active ingredient Piccolo Ram is the magic bullet on Chinese tallow trees. You just may have to increase your rate of the herbicide, but anything with Piccolo Ram. So Grazon P plus D, that P stands for Piccolo Ram, and has 2,4-D, but it's really the Piccolo Ram. And Tordon is Piccolo Ram only. Crossbow is triclopyr and 2,4-D. It's a good choice. Remedy is a good choice, and you can see kind of why they call it a popcorn tree. You can see when it starts to fruit that that kind of looks like a popcorn. Believe it or not, there is The USDA is evaluating a flea beetle that has activity on the Chinese tallow tree. This is a beetle that's native to China, and it also has larvae that feed on the roots. So the USDA is currently evaluating that for biocontrol. So I guess there is a possibility that we may have something eventually that will control it, and maybe reduce the population. So what about the hack and squirt method? This has always been a very effective method for us. This Tordon RTU product right here is not restricted use. It contains Piccolo Ram and 2,4-D. And very simply, this is a year-round treatment. You would make a hack and squirt the herbicide in the hack. You would make, for every 2 to 3 inches of trunk diameter, you'd make a hack and then squirt into that. And we've had really good results killing Chinese tallow trees with this particular method right here. The problem with it is, though, there is potential to actually kill a tree nearby, because if there's a tree growing in the root area in the of the tallow tree that you're trying to kill, that herbicide Piccolo Ram gets exuded out the roots, and sometimes the tree nearby will pick it up. But if it's another tallow tree, no problem. But if it's your prized fig tree or an oak tree, there can be an issue with it, because Piccolo Ram is very active on trees, and so you'd have to watch that. So what might be a better choice for you is the Basal Bark treatment with Diesel and triclopyr, or Diesel plus Remedy. And there's the recipe right there: 1 quart of Remedy and 3 quarts of Diesel. You'd probably want to use a very cheap sprayer, because it really can mess them up. But you'd simply make that Basal Bark treatment. This is also a year-round treatment. Only time you can't spray it is when we have snow or ice on the ground. After last year, after this last winter, before this last winter, I would never have even said that, but you never know what this winter is going to be like. But you would spray that bark all the way around, about 3 or 4 feet up from the ground. And again, this is a year-round treatment, and we've had a lot of success with this. That's 3 quarts of Diesel and 1 quart of Remedy, Basal Bark treatment. That's a very good way to kill tallow trees without collateral damage to your other trees, unless you accidentally spray them. So what about Chinese privet? Of course, this one was introduced in 1852. It's since escaped cultivation, and it's another one that produces a lot of seeds, and birds spread the seeds everywhere. I mainly see it growing on a fence row. And the thing is, metsulfuron, of all things, it's kind of surprising, but it is very effective, a very inexpensive herbicide. Cimarron, Patriot are trade names. Very, very effective on Chinese privet. Anywhere from May to September, we've had really good results in replicated studies killing the Chinese privet. Imazapyr, which is Arsenal, has also been very effective, but you can also have some root uptake from trees nearby with that particular herbicide. If I had to choose, I'd probably pick metsulfuron on a fence row where I have privet, and metsulfuron is also very good on briars too. But Chinese privet, something that we see a lot on fence rows, and this is a very, very effective treatment to apply metsulfuron. So another one that we see a lot of, and probably, if you've ever seen a presentation I've ever given, you've probably heard me talk about Buttercup control, and Buttercup is very, very easy to control. It starts germinating in October and November in our pastures and our hay meadows. If you have any history with Buttercup in those fields or hay meadows, you're going to see it every year. It's going to be a problem, especially in wet years. It'll be even worse. But it's an annual, and it's a big seed producer. And so a small population turns into a big population in a short amount of time, but it is highly sensitive to 2,4-D, highly sensitive to 2,4-D, cheap and easy to control. 2,4-D at a pint per acre. We've even looked at a half pint per acre and with a November, December application, and we've had really good results. I like the surefire way to kill it, though, is a pint per acre of 2,4-D amine, and then that application rate releases white clover. You'll get some injury on the white clover. It'll twist it up, but it will recover from it, and you can easily kill the Buttercup. It won't be a problem. I like that December, January timing a lot. February, even March is not too late. We get into April, deep into April, and it's already starting to produce the seeds, and that's what you're trying to stop from occurring. And so you want to try to get it as soon as you can during that cool period and very, very sensitive to 2,4-D. And I have never had anyone tell me they didn't kill it when they sprayed 2,4-D on it. It's just so sensitive to 2,4-D. Now, white clover will be released. Your other clovers are a lot more sensitive to 2,4-D. Or 2,4-D is very sensitive to these other clovers. So white clover, though, will tolerate to a certain extent. So I get this question a lot. What's my favorite fence row treatment? Well, I tell you, if I have a lot of brush and briars on a fence row, maybe some unwanted saplings on that fence row, I always like to have Remedy in there. And that's triclopyr. There's generics out there of that one. I like somewhere around a 2%, 1 to 2% solution, depending on how bad it is, a 1 to 2% solution. If I got a lot of Johnson grass or other unwanted grasses, maybe itch grass on that fence row. Itch grass is a grass that we see a lot in South Louisiana, but I'm starting to see it in North Louisiana too. I've seen it in Lincoln Parish of all places, growing along the roadside. I like that application on the fence row, Roundup Plus Remedy. That controls a lot of things. Now, it doesn't give you any residual there, but it will control a lot of things that are infesting your fence row. If you have a lot of privet on that fence row, I might throw in an ounce or so of metsulfuron per 100 gallons and to try to pick up the privet pretty well. So that's one of my favorite treatments right there, Roundup Plus Remedy on a fence row. So with that being said, if there are any questions about anything that we've talked about so far, I know I've covered a lot of areas, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time, something that we're looking at maybe that you're interested in, or a particular problem that you have in your hay meadows or pastures.
Thank you, Dr. Strahan. You do have a question. Can you see the Q&A box, or do you want me to read it to you?
Go ahead and read it.
Okay, so if there is headed nut sedge in establishing Bermuda grass, should you clip the sedge 3 to 4 inches, allow regrowth for a week, and apply permit, or just apply the permit to the headed sedges? It's a tongue twister for me.
Yeah. I like choice B on that one. I like to clip it and then allow a little bit of tender regrowth and then spray it. I think that kind of sets the nut sedge, and you'll get some tender regrowth from that, and you probably will open the canopy up a little bit where you'll be able to hit the target. So I would prefer to clip it first if it's already producing a seed head within reason. Now, if you can't get in there, you know you're not going to be able to get in that pasture and clip it, and then you might get rain and you might not get in that pasture or hay meadow, then I would go ahead and spray it. But if you could see into the future well enough that you're not going to have rain, I would probably clip it, allow some regrowth, and then go spray it.
Perfect, thank you. Y'all still have a few minutes if you want to get questions in. Again, you can put those in the Q&A box, or you can text those to me. My number is 512-818-5476. I am going to try to take over the screen for just a second and show y'all. Can you see that?
I may just, yes.
Okay. So while we're given a few more seconds to get, or a few more minutes to get questions in for Dr. Strahan, I do want to ask that you take just a few minutes. I mean, this takes less than 3 minutes to complete our survey to provide feedback on Dr. Strahan's webinar today, but also on our Beef Brunch educational series as a whole. This does give you the opportunity to go in and give topic suggestions or any other suggestions that you have for us. So there's a couple of ways to do that. If you're joining us now, or if you're watching the video on YouTube later that we'll post, or on our website, you can open the camera on your phone, view this little QR code on the right. A banner should pop up. You can click on that. It takes you directly to the survey. They're all anonymous, so you can go in and complete that. The other options, if you are watching this through YouTube, through the Beef Brunch website, or listening to the podcast at a later date, I will have a link to the survey as well in the video and podcast descriptions. So again, it doesn't take but just a few minutes to go in and do that, and we greatly appreciate the feedback on our series as a whole. So let me look back and see Dr. Strahan, I don't see any more questions for you today. I want to thank you again for your time, and we look forward to hopefully having you again sometime next year.
Sounds good.